The rain in the Pacific Northwest doesn't just fall. It erases. It is a constant, rhythmic static that washes away footprints, scents, and sometimes entire histories. In the deep valleys of the Olympic Peninsula, where the moss grows so thick it swallows sound, the difference between being lost and being gone is often measured in hours. This region is vast, a sprawling kingdom of emerald green that looks beautiful from the highway but turns hostile the moment you step off the pavement. It is a place where the geography itself seems to shift under the weight of the weather, hiding secrets in ravines that have never seen the sun. On the morning of October 14, 2018, the heavy clouds hanging over the western slope of the Cascades were nothing out of the ordinary. It was typical weather for Washington state in the autumn, pervasive, chilling dampness that seeped into the bones and turned the soil into a slick, treacherous paste. But for the family of Elias Thorne, that rain would become the backdrop of a nightmare that has never ended. It became a gray curtain that descended on a bright, ambitious young man and simply never lifted, leaving only questions in its wake. Elias was 28 years old, a freelance geological surveyor with a reputation for meticulousness that bordered on obsession. He wasn't a thrill-seeker chasing an adrenaline high, nor was he a weekend warrior underestimating the wild. He was a man of science, a professional who trusted maps, data, and hard facts above all else. He worked for private land developers and environmental conservation groups, often tasked with verifying property boundaries or assessing soil stability in remote areas. He knew the woods. He knew the risks, and perhaps most importantly, he knew how to prepare for the worst-case scenario. His apartment in Olympia was a testament to his organized mind. Gear was always cleaned, sorted, and ready for deployment. Yet, when his silver Jeep Wrangler was found 3 days later, parked on a deactivated logging road 20 miles from the nearest paved highway, preparation hadn't seemed to matter. The car was in perfect working order, sitting silent in the mist as if waiting for a driver who would never return. There was no sign of a struggle, no skid marks suggesting a frantic stop, no shattered glass indicating a break-in. The keys were missing. His wallet was sitting openly in the center console, and Elias Thorne had vanished into a landscape that felt less like a forest and more like a fortress built of timber and stone. To understand the gravity of his disappearance, you have to understand the specific location he was targeting. This wasn't a popular hiking trail populated by tourists, nor was it a well-trodden state park with ranges and marked paths. Elias was working near the fictional township of Blackwood Ridge, a dying timber town that time seemed to have forgotten. The area is defined by steep, crumbling ravines, dense second-growth timber, and a labyrinth of gravel roads that look identical to the untrained eye. It is a place where GPS signals die, cellular service is a memory, and the silence is so heavy it feels physical. The timeline of the disappearance begins with absolute clarity, which only makes the subsequent confusion more unsettling. Elias left his apartment in Olympia at 5:30 a.m. On that Tuesday, moving with the efficiency of someone on a schedule. His roommate Mark heard him making coffee in the pre-dawn dark. They spoke briefly in the kitchen. Mark recalls Elias seeming normal, perhaps a bit tired from late-night planning, but focused and ready to work. He watched Elias double-check his gear. Baga bright orange waterproof surveyor's pack that contained his life, laptop, field notes, and GPS units. He mentioned he had a 2-day job near Blackwood Ridge, mapping erosion patterns near a tributary of the Hum River. He promised to be back by Thursday night for a birthday dinner, a commitment Elias was not known to break. That conversation in the kitchen was the last time anyone who knew Elias saw him alive. At 7:15 a.m., credit card records show he stopped for gas and a breakfast sandwich at a service station in Aberdeen. The CCTV footage from the station is grainy, flickering in black and white, but it confirms his presence beyond a doubt. He is wearing a dark green rain shell, gray work pants, and heavy hiking boots, practical gear for the job ahead. He buys a bottle of water and a pack of gum. He pauses near the door, looks at his phone, types a message, and walks out into the gray morning. The message was sent to his sister, Sarah. It read simply, "Heading in? Signal will be spotty. Love you." It was a standard text, the kind of digital breadcrumb he dropped every time he went into the field. Sarah didn't think twice about it at the time. It was just part of their routine. She wouldn't realize until days later that this mundane digital time stamp would be the final anchor point of her brother's existence. Authorities believe Elias arrived at the access gate to the logging roads around 8:45 a.m. The gate was open, as it was supposed to be for authorized personnel carrying the correct permits. A logging crew working a tract of land 3 miles east reported seeing a silver Jeep pass them around 9:15 a.m. They noted the driver gave a polite wave as he navigated the potholes, driving slowly and carefully. They were the last human beings to interact with him, the last eyes to see him as a living, breathing person. The plan was simple on paper. Drive to the end of Road 401, hike 4 miles to the survey site, and set up camp. He was to collect his data on soil density, camp overnight, finish the work the next morning, and hike out by Thursday afternoon. He had enough food for 3 days. A high-end tent rated 4 storms, and an emergency beacon capable of summoning help via satellite. He was overprepared for a single night in the woods, carrying redundancy for every critical piece of equipment. When Thursday night came and went without Elias showing up for the birthday dinner, Sarah wasn't immediately panicked. Flat tires happen in the back country, batteries, the roads wash out, forcing long detours. She called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail, which she expected, given the location. She told herself he probably decided to camp one more night to finish the job or get better light for his survey photos. But when Friday morning broke, with no word, the knot in her stomach tightened into a hard, cold stone. She called Mark, his roommate, hoping for good news. Mark confirmed Elias hadn't come home. His bed was empty. His gear was gone. His cat hadn't been fed in 2 days. By Friday afternoon, the casual concern shifted to dread. Sarah contacted the Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office to file a report. Because Elias was an experienced outdoorsman and had filed a loose itinerary with his sister, the search began faster than in many missing person cases. Deputies were dispatched immediately to the area of Blackwood Ridge, checking the trailheads and access gates. But even with a quick start, the elements were already working against them in a catastrophic way. A storm system had moved in on Wednesday night, dumping nearly 3 inches of rain on the region in 24 hours. Deputies located the Jeep on Saturday morning, sitting alone in the drizzle. It was parked at the very end of Road 401. A dead-end gravel spur that dissolved into thick salal and brambles. This is where the first crack in the logic of the case appeared, a detail that didn't fit the profile of the man. The car was backed into a small turnout, positioned perfectly for an easy exit, facing the way out. This was typical of Elias, always thinking ahead, always ready for a quick departure. But the vehicle was unlocked. The driver's side door was actually unlatched, slightly ajar, letting the damp air inside. Inside, the scene was baffling in its normalcy, yet terrifying in its implications. A half-drunk coffee cup sat in the cue folder, the liquid cold and beginning to grow a film of mold. A map of the area was spread open on the passenger seat, smoothed out as if recently studied. But it wasn't the official topographical map provided by his employer for the survey job. It was an older, hand-drawn map on yellowed paper, the origin of which remains unknown to this day. On this map, someone had circled an area in red ink, an area that, according to official geological surveys, contained nothing. The circle highlighted a steep, unstable shale slope known for landslides, miles away from his assigned work zone. Investigators found his wallet, his ID, and $60 in cash sitting openly in the center console. Why would a man leave his identification behind in the middle of nowhere? Some suggested he didn't want to carry the bulk, but Elias was known for keeping his ID on him at all times in case of emergencies. The trunk told a different story, one that deepened the mystery significantly. His overnight bag was missing. His tent was missing. His sleeping bag was missing. This initially suggested he had hiked out as planned, taking his gear with him into the woods. But his heavy waterproof boots, the expensive ones he specifically bought for this trip, were sitting in the back of the Jeep. Beside them was a pair of sneakers, the kind he used for driving or walking around the city. This detail troubled the sheriff immediately and became a focal point of the investigation. If Elias had hiked out into the rough, wet terrain of the Olympic Peninsula, he would have worn the boots. The idea that he would trek 4 miles into dense forest wearing casual sneakers, leaving his primary gear behind, defied all logic. Unless he didn't plan to hike, unless he planned to come right back to the car in a matter of minutes. The search and rescue operation launched on Sunday was massive, one of the largest in the county's history. Dozens of volunteers, professional trackers, scent dogs, and a helicopter scoured the area for days. But the forest near Blackwood Ridge is unforgiving, a chaotic jumble of fallen trees and deep ravines. The canopy is so dense that thermal imaging from the air is often useless, blocked by layers of pine needles and leaves. The ground is a carpet of ferns and decaying logs that can hide a body mere feet from a searcher. The dogs picked up a scent almost immediately, raising hopes that this would be a quick recovery. They tracked Elias from the driver's side door of the Jeep, moving west into the timber with purpose. The handlers reported that the dogs seemed confident, heads down, pulling hard on the leads, tails wagging. They followed the scent for approximately 300 yards, down a gentle slope toward a rocky creek bed. And then, at the edge of the water, the dogs stopped cold. They didn't lose the scent in the way they usually do, circling and sniffing to reacquire the trail. The handlers described the dogs' behavior as confused and agitated, some even refusing to advance. One dog, a veteran bloodhound named Buster, who had found dozens of people, reportedly sat down and winded the air. The creek was shallow enough to wade across, barely ankle-deep, but the scent did not pick up on the other side. It was as if Elias Thorne had walked to the water's edge and simply evaporated into the mist. 4 5-day teams grid-searched the surrounding 2 miles, crawling on hands and knees through the brush. They found nothing. No candy bar wrappers, no disturbed moss, no sign of a campsite or a fire. The heavy rain had washed away any physical tracks, leaving only the baffling behavior of the dogs as a clue. The investigation then turned to the digital footprint, hoping technology could see what human eyes had missed. And this is where the story takes a turn from a tragic accident to something far more unsettling. Investigators subpoenaed Elias's phone records, looking for pings that could triangulate his position. They expected to see a drop in signal shortly after he sent the text to Sarah on Tuesday morning, and largely, that's what they found. The phone pinged a tower near the highway at 9:02 a.m., and then went silent. This was consistent with him entering the dead zone of the forest, where the hills block all reception. But there was an anomaly in the data that no one could explain. On Thursday night, 2 days after he vanished, and the night of the heavy storm, Elias's phone briefly reconnected to the network. It didn't connect to the nearest tower, which would have been the one near the highway he drove in on. Instead, it pinged a tower nearly 30 miles north in a completely different valley, separated by a mountain range. The signal lasted for exactly 11 seconds before vanishing again. Tech experts analyzed the data, running simulations to see how this connection was possible. For the phone to hit that specific tower, Elias would have to be at a significant elevation. He would need to be much higher than the topography of Blackwood Ridge allowed, or standing on a peak that didn't exist. Or, as one technician quietly suggested, he was moving at a speed impossible for a man on foot. During those 11 seconds, a voicemail was accessed. Elias didn't call anyone. He didn't dial 911. He checked his own voicemail. He listened to a message Sarah had left him earlier that day, pleading with him to call her. Then, the phone died, or was turned off, and it never powered on again. This data point obsessed the family and baffled the investigators. If he was alive on Thursday night, why didn't he call for help? Why check a voicemail in the middle of a survival situation? And how did he travel 30 miles north through virtually impassable terrain in the middle of a storm without a vehicle? Theories began to multiply, filling the vacuum left by the lack of hard evidence. The first and most prevalent theory was the paradoxical undressing. Hypothermia is a deceptive killer that tricks the mind as the body shuts down. In the final stages, victims often feel an intense, burning heat due to the dilation of blood vessels. They strip off their clothes in a final, confused attempt to cool down, often folding them neatly nearby. Authorities speculated that Elias, caught in the storm without his heavy gear, became This might explain why he left the boots behind. Perhaps he had already started to succumb to confusion at the car. But this theory had massive holes that the family refused to ignore. If he was confused at the car, why lock the doors but leave the window open? Why was the map placed so neatly on the seat? And where were his clothes? Usually, in these cases, searchers find a trail of discarded gear leading away from the last known point. In Elias's case, not a single sock, shirt, or jacket was ever recovered. The second theory involved the third party, a darker possibility involving human malice. The area around Blackwood Ridge has a history that locals only whisper about. While much of it is protected land or corporate timber, the deep woods have long been used for illicit activities. Illegal growing operations, poaching rings, and mobile meth production units hide in the shadows of the old growth. Locals know there are roads you don't drive down and gates you don't cross if you want to stay safe. Did Elias stumble upon something he wasn't supposed to see while mapping the area? As a surveyor, his job was literally to document the land, to record what was there. If he found an illegal grow site or evidence of timber theft, he might have been confronted by the perpetrators. This would explain the missing key, someone taking them to prevent him from fleeing the scene. It would explain the lack of a campsite. He never got the chance to set it up because he was intercepted. However, the state of the car complicates this theory significantly. If he was abducted or killed at the car, why leave the wallet with the cash inside? Why leave the expensive GPS equipment that was also found in the back seat, worth thousands of dollars? Criminals usually take the valuables or burn the vehicle to destroy evidence. The scene felt too staged, or conversely, too interrupted to be a professional hit. Then there was the walk-away theory, the idea that Elias chose to leave his life behind. Every year, a small percentage of missing persons cases turn out to be voluntary disappearances. People overwhelmed by debt, depression, or secret lives simply choose to step out of their existence. Elias was under some stress. His student loans were significant, and the freelance work was inconsistent. He had recently broken up with a long-term girlfriend, though friends insisted the split was amicable and mature. Could Elias have staged his own disappearance to start over somewhere else? He had the skills. He knew the terrain. He knew how to disappear in the woods. The missing camping gear could be the supplies he took with him to survive the first few weeks. The ping 30 miles north could have been him exiting the woods at a different location, hitchhiking out to a new life. But his bank accounts have never been touched since that day at the gas station. His social security number has never been used for a job or a lease, and those who knew him best, like Sarah, vehemently deny this possibility. They describe a man who was deeply connected to his family, who had plans for the future. He had just put a deposit down on a new apartment in Seattle and was excited about the move. Elias was building a life, not dismantling one. As weeks turned into months, the official search was scaled back and eventually suspended. The volunteers went home to their families. The posters in the gas station windows began to fade and peel, but for Sarah, the investigation was just beginning. She couldn't reconcile the skilled outdoorsman with the victim described by police. She began digging into his work files, looking for anything that could explain his actions. She contacted the development company that had hired him for the survey. They were cooperative but vague, treating the incident as a tragic liability issue. They claimed Elias was just doing a standard soil density survey for a potential logging road. But when Sarah requested the specific coordinates he was assigned to check, she noticed something strange. The coordinates on the official work order did not match the red circle on the hand-drawn map found in his car. The official coordinates were for a low-lying valley, a standard, safe location. The red circle on Elias's map was for a ridgeline known locally as the Devil's Step. It was a jagged formation of rock that was notoriously dangerous and geologically useless for development. Why was he interested in that ridge? Why go off-book? Sarah found a notebook in his apartment that the police had overlooked during their initial sweep. It wasn't a work log, it was a personal journal where he kept his private thoughts. The last entry, dated 2 days before he left, was cryptic and disturbing. It read, "The elevation data is wrong. The locals talk about the hum. I need to hear it myself. The hum, it's a phenomenon reported in various parts of the world, a low-frequency noise that only some people can hear. In the Olympic Peninsula, there are old legends, stories passed down in logging camps for generations. They speak of a sound that comes from the earth itself, a vibration that precedes disaster. Some say it's the friction of tectonic plates grinding together deep underground. Otur Sait es. The wind moving through massive underground caverns that have never been mapped. And of course, there are darker, more folkloric explanations involving things that live beneath the soil. Was Elias chasing a sound? Did his meticulous, scientific mind latch onto an anomaly that he couldn't explain? This might explain why he went off the official map, ignoring his assignment. It might explain why he went to a dangerous ridgeline known for unstable acoustics. If he was chasing a geological mystery, he might have taken risks he wouldn't normally take. 6 months after the disappearance, a hiker found a backpack deep in the forest. It wasn't found near the search grid or near the car. It was found 12 miles east, wedged into a rocky crevice near a waterfall, almost invisible. It was an orange surveyor's pack, faded by the sun and covered in algae. The ID tag was legible, protected by a plastic laminate. Elias Thorne. The authorities retrieved the pack, treating it as the break in the case they had been waiting for. Inside, the contents were preserved in high-quality waterproof bags. His laptop was there, his field journal was there, but his emergency beacon-y device that could have saved his life was smashed. It hadn't just been dropped. The casing was shattered, the internal electronics pulverized. It looked as if it had been hit repeatedly with a heavy rock. The laptop was damaged by moisture, but a forensic data recovery specialist managed to retrieve a few files. Most were standard spreadsheets and topographical maps, but there was one audio file, recorded on his phone and transferred to the laptop's hard drive. The timestamp was 10:43 p.m. on Tuesday, the first night he was out there. The audio is 3 minutes long. It is mostly the sound of rain hitting the tent canvas, a relentless drumming. It is heavy, rhythmic rain, typical of a storm in the Olympics, but in the background, beneath the white noise of the storm, there is a sound. It is faint, rhythmic, and metallic, cutting through the static. It sounds like a bell. Specifically, it sounds like a maritime bell, the kind used on buoys to warn ships of shallow water or fog. The problem is, Elias was 20 miles inland, deep in the mountains. There is no ocean within earshot. There are no buoys in the deep forest. Audio engineers analyzed the sound, looking for signs of fabrication. They confirmed it wasn't a digital artifact or a glitch in the recording. It was an external sound recorded by the microphone in the environment, a heavy, tolling bell, ringing every 8 seconds with mechanical precision. In the final 30 seconds of the recording, Elias speaks. His voice is a whisper, barely audible over the rain, trembling with fear. He says, "It's getting closer. The elevation is shifting. I'm not where I'm supposed to be." Then the recording ends abruptly, leaving only silence. This discovery reignited the case for a brief moment, but it provided no answers, only more terrifying questions. If he was hearing a bell, was he hallucinating from stress or exposure? Audio hallucinations are common in high-stress situations, but the microphone recorded it. The machine does not hallucinate. The machine only records what is there. Was it a prank? Was someone else out there in the woods, ringing a bell to lure him out? This leans into the foul play theory, implying a level of psychological malice that is terrifying to consider. Or is there a geological explanation that we don't understand? Could wind resonating through a hollow tree or a cave create such a specific metallic sound? Could it be a piece of old logging machinery, left to rust for decades, swinging in the storm? The investigation hit a wall that it has never been able to climb. The backpack was found, but no body has ever been recovered. The smashed beacon suggests Elias didn't want to be found, or someone didn't want him to be found. The cryptic journal entry about the hum and the recording of the bell paint a picture of a descent into madness, or perhaps a descent into a reality that we simply cannot comprehend. Today, the road where his car was found is overgrown, reclaimed by the wild. The forest has swallowed the turnout, hiding the spot where the silver Jeep once sat. The yellow police tape is long gone, disintegrated by the sun and rain, but the mystery of Elias Thorne remains as thick and impenetrable as the fog that rolls off the Pacific. His sister, Sarah, still visits the area once a year on the anniversary of his disappearance. She doesn't hike into the woods anymore. She knows better now. She stands at the edge of the tree line, listening to the wind in the firs. She says that sometimes, when the wind is right, the forest feels too quiet. She says it feels like the trees are holding their breath, waiting for something. There is a concept in missing persons cases known as the zone of death. These are areas where the combination of terrain, weather, and isolation creates a perfect storm for disappearance. The Olympic Peninsula is one of these zones, a place of immense beauty and immense danger. It is beautiful, majestic, and completely indifferent to human life or suffering. Authorities have officially labeled the case as inactive, pending new leads. They operate under the assumption that Elias succumbed to the elements. They believe he likely fell into a ravine or a swollen river that carried his body away to the sea. They say the bell was likely a trick of the wind, and the smashed beacon was a result of a fall. But those who listen to the audio recording aren't so sure about that simple explanation. The rhythm of the bell is too precise. The tone is too clear and metallic. And the fear in Elias's voice is palpable. A primal reaction to something wrong. What happened on that ridge? In the dark. Why did the dogs stop at the water? Who, or what, was ringing the bell in the middle of the wilderness? We are left with fragments of a puzzle that will never be solved. A car with locked doors and no keys. A map with a red circle around nothing. A ping from a tower that shouldn't have been reachable. And a young man who walked into the rain and became part of the silence. As you sit here, safe in your home, listening to this story, remember that the woods are vast. We occupy only a small fraction of them, and we understand even less. There are places on the map where the lines get blurry, where the elevation doesn't match the data, and where the only thing waiting for you is the echo of your own footsteps, fading into the dark. Elias Thorne is still out there, somewhere in the green labyrinth. Maybe he's resting under a canopy of ferns, finally at peace. Maybe he's deep in a ravine where the sun never touches the ground. Or maybe, just maybe, he found the source of the sound he was looking for and realized too late that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Until next time, keep your eyes open and stay safe.